Media companies and the advertisers who pay their bills should be asking themselves one big question. What the hell are we going to do about climate change? Just come off the back of the COP27 conference in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, and since the last conference a year ago in the UK, we've had a flurry of initiatives in the ad industry. We've seen the creation of AdNet Zero, which subsequently went international. We've seen the big media buying groups launch carbon calculators, sustainability marketplaces, team up with independent companies that are going to measure carbon and do reporting for them. One of the companies you might have heard talked about a lot is Scope3. Scope3 is a company which claims to be the only company to measure end-to-end emissions from across the media and the advertising supply chain. It has just inked a deal with Interpublic Group, one of the world's biggest media buying holding groups, and they're going to be doing reporting on digital advertising. So my colleague Ella Sagar spoke to the co-founder and head of product, Anne Coghlan at Scope3, to talk about where all this is going, what it hopes to achieve, and firstly, what is Scope3's mission?
Scope3 is a new company. We are almost officially a year old now, and our mission is to decarbonize media and advertising. So when you talk about, and you ask me what the challenges that we're facing, I think it's actually quite similar to what we as an industry are facing, as well as what the whole world is facing, in that our mission has a bit of a ticking timer. So, as we speak today, there are people from governments and scientific community at COP27 trying to come to some sort of agreement on how we can, save the future of the planet. And so I think for Scope3, our challenge is really helping the media and advertising industry have a strong story within that.
And within that sort of mission, I mean, obviously, I think some people can see getting involved in sustainability. There's a lot of knowledge gaps. There's a lot of, it's a potential kind of, you don't want to go down the wrong track. What are the biggest misconceptions, would you say, about carbon emissions and measurement in media in particular and advertising?
Yeah, I think there are many, but I think I'll pick out maybe three. So I think the first one is that digital has a much lower carbon footprint than print. When you think about all of the different parties involved in deciding what ad gets shown to which user on a specific page, there is a lot of different computers and servers all around the world being used in that process, and the carbon footprint really, really adds up. So I think that's the first misconception. Another misconception is that measurement is complicated. And I think I would say that the methodology and the extracting all the different data sources to understand how to measure is not an easy task, but the actual then application of that methodology to be able to understand what your carbon footprint is. So if you're a brand serving an advertising campaign, working out what that actual carbon footprint is not as complicated as people might think. And then I think the third one is that the idea of then taking action, and that action being something that is then slow. So at Scope3, we're trying to drive systemic change in the industry. And actually on Friday, we challenged a publisher to reduce their carbon footprint by reducing the crazy number of partners that they were working with, which really adds up to create, thousands of different servers trying to decide which ad will show. And they did it from kind of call to action to actually making meaningful impact in, I think, about 3 hours. So the kind of action being slow is not something that we think is actually the case.
So systemic change can be maybe not overnight, but quicker than, a year-long, multi-year-long process.
Absolutely. And thankfully, that's a misconception, right? Because if we think about, where we need to be in 2030 and where a brand themselves needs to be in 2030, I think it's 4/5 of UK FTSE 100 companies have carbon net zero goals in their, officially on their websites. And so it can't be something where systemic change takes a really long time, because we're almost in 2023.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to think that's only 8 years away. And as part of that systemic change, Scope3 announced its first global kind of partnership with a big holding group media agency, IPG Media Brands, last week. What do you see as the significance of this, and where would you like to see it go?
I think it's hugely significant. So firstly, IPG Media Brands has been a really great partner for us. I think they were one of the first to call us as soon as we announced our mission and the desire to help the industry decarbonize back in January. I think for their customers, it's huge because it means that we'll start to see, global brands have access to that carbon measurement to start driving that change. But I think more broadly for an industry as a whole, we know that agencies are agents of change, right? They're the change makers. They help their customers to ultimately make those adjustments, and that can be small or hopefully in this case like very large to plans. They advise how media is spent. And so I think IPG Media Brands definitely the first, but they won't be the last major holdco that we announce that we're working with. And I think this urgency and need to solve the problem, I would hope is kind of one where global holdcos align together to be one voice within the industry, so that there is no confusion and we can kind of move forward collectively in this movement.
I think that was something that definitely came up at the Net Zero Global Summit, that idea of collective responsibility, collective action, free competition, measurement, which all sounds great. How can advertising engage meaningfully with sustainability and avoid greenwashing, which I think is a big concern for a lot of brands, that they don't want to be caught out, or they don't want any backlash, but they also do want to try and new, more sustainable ways of doing things?
I think that's a really great question. It's something that we talk a lot about internally, because for a brand to say, hey, we are decarbonizing our media supply chain is maybe it's not, the biggest source of emissions. If you think about all of their emissions as a pie chart, it's probably a small slice when you think about global multinational companies, especially ones with physical products, where they're probably the manufacturing area of their businesses would cause a lot more of the emissions. I would say that for brands to kind of speak and articulate authentically what they're trying to achieve, and the kind of collective power of learning together is something I think that's super important, would probably avoid the greenwashing. And I think there is a difference between talking among businesses and how we can learn together and how we can drive this systemic change, compared with talking directly with consumers. I think there is a lot that can be done without having to stand up and say, oh, look at this, look, isn't this great? I've decarbonized my media supply chain. Probably if I pick a random person on the street, they don't necessarily know that there is a carbon footprint associated with that. So I think it's just really being thoughtful and authentic about the learning. We're trialing internally green working. So what we're working towards, what we're trying to improve, versus saying, oh, everything's great and we're, doing all this
amazing green work. That's a great idea, so that it's an idea of a goal or a kind of progression, that no one can just achieve these things immediately, and also it kind of gives the brands that leeway of, oh, we are working on this, and we kind of almost invite feedback, or like if you've got any sort of the users or customers want to get involved, then that kind of opens up that door. That's quite good.
I think we try and practice that ourselves. Obviously we're not a brand that's selling consumer goods or anything like that, but we try and learn in public. So our methodology, we publish, we galvanize feedback and inputs from not just the industry, but from the scientific community, from experts, And so that learning in public, I think, is really helpful because it can push you forward quicker.
I think it's my last question now. So what do you think is next for sustainability in media on this? And it is a journey. It's quite cliche to say, but it is a journey. What do you see as the future of sustainability in media?
I think that this year, 2022, has definitely been a getting people on that journey, to use your words, to recognize that there is a problem here, specifically focusing on the emissions problem within the industry, but with a large sprinkling of hope that we can drive positive action quickly. And so I think, what's next for sustainability in media, I think 2023 is going to be where we start seeing systemic reduction in carbon emissions within the industry. And I think real steps forward into making, hopefully making this industry one of the first, if not the first, to be able to say, like, we've decarbonised. We've done our part to try and help the world achieve its net zero goals.